Is she going to cue us when it's time?
I think we're ready to go, Michael.
Okay, let's do it. Hello, everyone. We're here. Welcome today for this AI Summit Visual Artist Panel. My name is Michael Kavna, arts reporter with the Washington Post and an artist as well. Long time, worked for many syndicates. And I recently wrote about for the Washington Post as part of a special section about AI art. If you want to read more, among the people I interviewed are two of our panelists today, and you can just Google AI artists and my name, and that Washington Post article will come up. Thank you. I have four highly distinguished gentlemen with me today who are deeply steeped as artists and who are also adjusting on the fly to this brave new world. I'm going to kick it off. Dave, do you want to start? And gentlemen, go around and say a little bit about yourself. And, we're presuming this is the authentic you and not an AI version of you.
Well, we'll have to see, won't we? Can you tell the difference? That's going to be a crucial question. My name is Dave McKean. I'm an illustrator and creative, I would say, filmmaker, writer, music and theatre and all sorts. And I have recently made this book called Prompt, Conversations with Artificial Intelligence. That it was started a day after finding out about this. 2 days after. The day after finding out about this, I spent on the floor in the fetal position. And then I made the book to road test the software, see what it did, to try and explain to others what it did, to see where its flaws are and where its strengths are, to see where its ethical problems are. And I had a load of questions and I tried to work them out in this book.
I do want to quickly point out, Dave, are copies of that book now again available?
They are now available in paperback on my website as of now, and in a few shops and distributors as well soon, next week, I think.
And what's the URL?
It's davemckeen.com.
That's what I thought.
Shop on that site.
There you go. Jason, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Jason Chatfield. I'm a cartoonist. My work appears all over the place. I'm a syndicated newspaper cartoonist. I work for the New Yorker and all kinds of publications. I do digital art. I'm the president of the National Cartoonist Society, the NCS. We are basically an organization of hundreds of the world's major cartoonists working in all the branches of the profession, including comic books, graphic novels, editorial cartoons, animation, web comics, online platforms, newspaper comic strips, panels, gag cartoons, greeting cards, advertising, magazine, and book illustrations, the full gamut of artists. Personally, I'm a staunch advocate for integrating new technologies into art workflows. I annoy the hell out of my fellow cartoonists with new tools and new Photoshop updates and Wacom tablets. I've been a Wacom ambassador for nearly 20 years. So I'm always sort of an early adopter. I've been following AI generally for about 20 years, but particularly I've been following the AI development side of art for a very long time, going back to its sort of nascent stage and right before it sort of exploded last year onto everyone's sort of front page. I've worked on Sam Harris's Essential Guide, Making Sense of Artificial Intelligence workbooks. And I think it's important to know, just for the record, that this is the first time all of these creative organizations have even met each other, or let alone come together for anything.
Yes,
for this scale. Like, nothing of this scale has been done before. This is very much I don't want to be hyperbolous, but it's pretty existential for us. So
yes,
we have a lot of artists across all these various disciplines who are deeply concerned about these systematic ethical problems. And I think we need to have these respectful conversations about the rights of the artists that these technologies have been built on.
Well said. I think all we need now is an international cartoonist anthem, and we could you could feel the strength of the force, the global force. Mr. Silverberg, you have as a legal scholar, as a litigator of high esteem, you've spent decades working on behalf of not just artists but creators of all types. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, today I'm here in the capacity of CEO of the American Society for Collective Rights Licensing. And so ASCRL is a 501c6 tax-exempt, not-for-profit organization that deals with collective licensing. And collective licensing is a system that's used in many countries around the world. We belong to an organization called IFRO, the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, which includes approximately 200 collective rights societies, and CISAC, which is another international group of author organizations. And the systems that they employ are to add to their primary copyright systems, systems very analogous to the systems that we have in the United States, with supplementary or what they call secondary rights. And these include things like that we don't have here in the United States, like library lending, where a library lends a book and authors get paid again when books are lent out of libraries. Another collecting system will focus on levies or taxes for private copying. You know how our stuff gets copied on cell phones, computer printers, fax machines, and so on. And so these countries apply a levy or a tax on equipment in order to compensate authors for these private copying uses. Another thing that might be involved is very limited educational uses. This is where, for example, a professor in Australia at a university might be able to make 25 copies of some cartoons to show in their class, which might be under a fair use doctrine or an exception in that country, but they're able to do that in Australia without contacting the author. Many times, if the author is a member of the Collecting Society, Copyright Agency Australia there, and Copyright Agency Australia will collect funds for those uses, and they get distributed to authors. And so our interest here is to see if collective administration might be an answer to getting our constituents paid in the AI space.
And I look forward to hearing more too about, as we talk about cases, recent class action suits, et cetera, involving AI and where we're going with that. I should point out we have a very international team here spanning different nations and continents, and that includes you, Mr. Rutledge. I know among your clients, you've had First Nation clients up there in Canada as a designer and a design expert. Please tell us about yourself.
Oh man, it's so great to be here, guys. I'm in great company here with David and Jason and James here, as well as yourself, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here today to share my experience with this particular topic, AI, and how it can affect many creative industries. I myself am a graphic designer. I've got over 30 years of experience with graphic design and working with Indigenous communities here in Canada. Those are First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. And so, I'm the former national president of the Design Professionals of Canada, and I'm also a member of RGD Canada as well. So I've got, a really close ear to the ground, listening to the membership of designers throughout Canada, throughout this amazing country here, as well as, to my American counterparts. We've got a lot of connections in south of the border here as well. So, excuse me. I'm First Nations. I'm Ojibwe from Little Grand Rapids First Nations, and I generally do do a land acknowledgement. I'm currently living in Whitehorse, Yukon, on the traditional territories of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Ta'an Council. So, besides graphic design, I'm also a speaker, presenter on decolonizing design, decolonizing education as well, and a futurist and proud Ojibwe of the Little Grand Rapids First Nation.
Thank you, gentlemen, to have all of you here today. And what I'm hoping to do is start with a campfire, and maybe we build a bonfire here, but to keep it round table, keep this very open. And I hope to hit a lot of topics today because there's so much to discuss right now. One quick, I'll do a speed round question here so we can get things going a little quicker. Is we know that with artists, you can actually search to see if you have trained AI tools, or as we say, have you been scraped? So I ask each of you, as artists and doing, art tangential work, have each of you been scraped? And if so, was it painful? You want to start that one, Dave?
I haven't looked. I don't really want to know. I'm sure I have because I've seen my name crop up on various prompts. So I have been scraped in every meaning of that word, and I do have a notion for it.
Yes. Jason, you want to go next? I think you've
Yeah,
spoken to this.
I did go to Have I Been Trained, and I found it one or two different things, but the nature of my work being as chameleonic as I am, I have a lot of different styles. So unlike Dave, you wouldn't pick my style in a lineup from a mile away. So there's all kinds of crap on there. So, haha.
You're staying ahead of the game. Yeah,
Sure.
There you go. What about you, Mark? Have you searched yourself for this?
You know what? I have, and it's pretty darn scary and painful. Being Indigenous and in the creative space, you're sort of in a niche sort of market, and so when one looks up Indigenous people, you kind of stand out. And so, yeah, it's pretty painful.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start from a point of that we can have many branching off points from this, but it is in response to what we've seen. In my reporting late last year and early this year, I began reaching out not only individual artists, including I interviewed Sarah Anderson in the piece I described earlier, who's part of a class action suit in Northern California, and you can read her comments there. But I also reached out to different organizations, including the Society of Illustrators, the Association of American Editorial Cartoonists, Society of Production Designers, and of course, one being the National Cartoonist Society, of which you lead that group, Jason. And I want to quickly read what your group and the statement you issued recently said the National Cartoonist Society values the hard work and skill required to create original art. The copyright of our members' work should always be protected to the fullest extent, and we oppose any attempts to diminish those protections. The NCS always encourages the exploration of new ways that technology enables our members to create their work. And I do want to speak to you, say we're not Luddites here as artists. You guys are on the cutting edge here. So I want to definitely speak to that. We do, however, oppose the commercial use of AI generated images that have been trained on copyrighted works. Crucial key point here, because as we can get into, you both can lose work as a freelance illustrator or just as an artist, and also have that the salt poured in the wound is you trained the very thing that might be taking money out of your pocket. And the last part of your statement, and will not allow any artificially created art to be submitted for consideration for membership, nor any category of our awards. And we know there was a case, I believe it was in Colorado, someone winning a photo contest and finally admitting it was AI. So that is, I was speaking with a photo editor at the Post yesterday about this area. So Jason, look, to kick it off, please, on this, can you speak to aspects of your statement and how you arrived? It's concise, and yet it covers multitudes.
Yeah, that's very deliberate. We really took a lot of time to build that language so that it didn't so that it was very, very clear about our position on this, because it is easy to be afraid and reactive to technologies like this. As I mentioned earlier, I've been following this technology for some time, and I knew this was kind of coming. And to that extent, we're kind of ready for how to approach when people started to apply to membership to our organization using images that had been trained on artwork that the artists had not consented to. As well as we have an annual awards called the Rubin Awards, and it's open to everyone. You do not have to be a member to enter the Rubens. And we do have to draw a line here, as the Society of Illustrators have done, and a lot of other organizations have since done, that anything generated by Midjourney or DALL-E 2 or anything where, or Stable Diffusion, anything that was sort of scraped from artwork, copyrighted artwork, but any kind of artwork that was not consented to, we just can't, in good faith and with the ethics that we hold pretty clearly as far as the rights of artists, we can't accept that in. And you mentioned, you know, there are competitions and there are, you know, instances around the world where people have now won awards using AI art. I think you might have mentioned one, and I do remember, I think it was Jason Allen who won a painting contest. His response when he was asked if AI art could be a tool that could help existing working artists was, "Art is dead, dude. It's over. AI won, humans lost." Like, that kind of, pardon my French, reductive wank is an official on the record response in the Journal of Record to a legitimate question. Now,
Yes.
it's that kind of attitude that we're kind of, that's sort of the provenance of our statement, is we have respect for the process that goes into creating art and the lifelong sacrifice that goes into building that skill. And we really have to draw a line somewhere now. And so that's why we did.
Oh, yeah. When you're trying to debate someone who starts with the word bra, you may not be working for the best place. Yeah.
Hey, Michael, could I say something in support of Jason's remarks? Because Askrel is very supportive of basically every point that Jason just made. At our upcoming Board of Advisor meeting, there's a resolution being presented that we will not pay any authors for AI-generated artwork unless that AI-generated artwork is created from the data of the artist's own images. In other words, their own material has been used.
Yes.
So this year we're looking to distribute about $3 million in the illustration and photography space for the collective licensing that we do, but AI-generated images will not qualify for any of that money.
Yeah. You know, one thing in reporting this out, what I came across is, I think Molly Crabapple, the artist, I believe she's New York based, recently made a good point. And I interviewed her years ago, but I think PBS NewsHour interviewed her recently. But she made a key point that there's a difference between what fine artists who are selling, since you know, we speak about paintings. If you're selling physical paintings, you're coming from a very different place than artists who are selling work that can be reproduced by pixels, or, you know, your work is seen in digital form. And it is, you know, I've worked with many design directors, many art editors, worked as an editor myself on this front, and you know, it's a different world when we're talking about you know, what Molly Crabapple is saying is it's a lot of it's you know, illustrators and commercial artists, and that's a different world. So I feel like there's been a blurring of response. Can any of you speak to that in any way you want to go at it?
I feel like I want to hear from Dave on this.
Yeah.
I'm trying to gather my thoughts because you know, it's so complicated.
Yes.
Of all the things that have been said so far, I think proving copyright infringement is going to be a real, you know, it's a really difficult thing. It's a key thing.
Yeah.
You know, training the software on a batch of images, but then coming up with an image that does not cut and paste those images. It deep learns the nature of them. Sort of rips the DNA of them,
Yeah.
and then comes up with something original.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and
So
part
this
of
is
it
going to
is,
be it's going to be a very difficult thing to define. And
yeah,
I think,
that defining conversation
Yeah.
legally and ethically and socially and everything is going to be crucial.
yeah, I think with the deepest of respect to James's work and other organizations like Copyright Agency Limited, who I'm a part of, I love getting those checks. It is going to be difficult to reverse engineer a lot of these things to build some kind of evidential sort of, hey, it pulled from this copyrighted artwork, and I think we're trying to use existing copyright law to moderate this or to hem it in is using old medication for a new disease. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. I just don't.
The one thing that, though, is the name of the artist is in the prompt often.
Yes,
absolutely.
Isn't that a really obvious paper trail?
I mean, removing the "in the style of" at the end of a prompt is a very easy thing for these companies to be able to do. In the same way that if ChatGPT is asked to tell a joke about a certain minority, it will refuse. You can build that into the technology, and in the prompt, if it says "in the style of Dave McKean," it'll say, "I'm sorry, I can't reproduce the artwork." It should say, "I'm sorry, I can't produce the artwork in the style of Greg Rutkowski or Dave McKean or Mark Rutledge." It really should be able to just build that guide rail in very easily.
There's a number of problems in applying copyright laws, Jason indicated. First of all, just remark that styles are not copyrightable. And so trying to copy someone's style, even obviously so, isn't going to constitute a copyright infringement. Copyright infringement is where an image has been copied. And ultimately, you need a copy in order to have an infringement. One of the law school questions I used to ask my law students was, if somebody does a really bad job copying, but they still were copying, is it copyright infringement? And the answer is no, it's not. Copyright infringement requires that there be a substantial similarity between the resulting or offending image and the protected copyrightable image. When we're talking about the AI ML output, those issues are more easily dealt with. Your final resulting AI image looks like the author's underlying image. It's a copyright infringement, and it's no different than the existing copyright infringement paradigms and what you have to do to prove that. And you don't have to prove where it came from. You just have to prove that there was access to the underlying protected image and that they're substantially similar. And then a judge or jury is able to infer, under United States law anyway, if that's what we're talking about here, under US law, the judge or jury can draw the conclusion that these similarities result from copying and that there's been an infringement. The larger problem comes with the data mining in the scraping, because that occurs in more than one way. It does not only occur by copying the images. The software can look at the images and derive the information it needs from them without actually copying them. And so you don't have any copying in that regard that would constitute an infringement. If you do have a platform that is actually copying the images onto a platform, that's a different matter. But it's very challenging still, because if there are 1 billion images that are being used to generate the AI output, what is your individual interest? Even if you could show and you can trace that your image is one of those billion, what is your remedy for being 1/1,000,000th of their revenue? I read with regards to one of the lawsuits that I think a lawyer commented, well, if every image fetched only $1, that would still be billions of dollars. But for individual authors, it would be $5.
You know, one thing in my reporting that Sarah Anderson, she's involved in the class action lawsuit in California, they're suing an AI company, and there's a second party in DeviantArt as well. One thing she said to me is, she has a huge online following, and her images are all over for like Sarah Scribbles and her other work. And what she said was that when she looks, AI cannot yet produce exact copies of what she says is an intentionally simplified or sparser style. Within that style is a very alive line. So she says, eventually, I know AI will be able to produce perfect copies of my work. And besides the financial offense, she feels like it's this almost theft of the soul. She said, to paraphrase her, because she feels like you spend a lifetime building everything you learn and read and everything you try. It's like terroir, right? It's like the soil with wine. You as an artist, you've arrived at this over decades, and now along comes something that is reproducing it, that almost in a clinical fashion. Can any of you speak to, is this theft of the soul as an artist?
I think, I mean, for the record, so this is the lawsuit. Sarah Anderson, Kelly McKernan, and Carla Ortiz, they filed a class action lawsuit against Stability AI, DeviantArt, and Midjourney for the use of image generating models, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney. They're described as a 21st century collage tool that remixes the copyrighted works using diffusion. I do remember Sarah saying, and Sarah, for the people who don't know, she before AI, her work was already being co-opted by the alt-right. They made a font out of her handwriting, which is such a deeply personal sort of thing to take someone's handwriting. It's literally their signature. And she said, I think you alluded to the fact that, humans can't help but bring their own humanity into art. It's a deeply personal thing, and AI has just erased the humanity from it by just reducing her life's work to an algorithm. What it is now, and in the Times article that she showed, was the difference between when her stuff was being co-opted using like Photoshop and font generators versus what was used, I think, on DALL-E 2. It didn't really look exactly like her style, but it was enough of a simulacrum of it that, as you say, that lively line, and the line is that's your style. And James is right. You can't copyright a style, but it is a part of you. That's you. That's your soul. And if you take that and you look at the current version of it that she showed, okay, an argument might be squeaked by that it doesn't really look like her style, but by December it will, and by next June it'll look even more like it, and by 2040 it'll be completely indistinguishable. So it's more about what it will be able to do, not what it can do right now.
Yeah, and that's what she said. And she, as a quote, just in the Washington Post article in which I interviewed her, she said, "My work, like every other artist, is informed by my lived experiences and my education and my life, and therefore it's deeply personal." And that is why she said that this is basically stealing her soul. She said, AI stolen my work and have broken it down in a way that I believe it will be able to create perfect copies eventually. So you speak, Jason, you say, that's coming around quickly. Now, all of you can speak to, what you fear going ahead. But one part of that is, I know you, Jason, have spoken to saying that legislation and litigations is the wheels grind slowly. This case could take years. So we're, in some have said we're almost in a sci-fi film where the machines are operating at a speed exponentially faster than the law can keep up with and other bodies. Could you, Jason, your quote, and you, James, all of you, but I know each of you have spoken to that specifically.
I'll quickly touch on it because I want to hear from everyone else. Yeah. I feel that quote that I gave, that litigation tends to work a little more quickly than legislation, it was based off the fact that the AI caucus, this voluntary caucus in Congress, only formed 2 years ago. Their whole ethos is we're going to wait till something bad happens before we decide to regulate or build in any guide rails. They didn't think, hey, maybe we should actually have some soft edges to this just so that, something disastrous doesn't happen. They are on record, even this morning on Hard Fork with Kevin Roos and Casey Newton saying, I think we're going to wait until the nuclear bomb goes off before we build in any laws against nuclear weapons. So it worries me that these people who are legislating can't even fathom the technology, let alone think about how they would build any guide rails in. They're reluctant to do it on the leading edge of the technology. And I totally understand that. I really, really do. I just think it's a bad idea. Sorry, and I'll shut up. I've been talking too much. I'm sorry.
Do you want to speak to that, James? I mean, all of you, but
Yeah,
James
well,
from you.
I've got nothing against copyright litigation. I've been a copyright litigator for 40 years. And, I find sometimes that it's a very effective remedy for infringement claims, and it exonerates the client's rights, and it preserves the moral content of their work, and it compensates them, and they get paid. But with litigation, you need to be careful what you ask for. It doesn't always turn out the way you want. The litigations here are not guaranteed to vindicate these authors' rights, and precedent might actually be established which is detrimental, where a court says that an exception applies or there's not an infringement. They don't certify the class. They determine that unfair competition law doesn't apply. They determine that the rights of publicity claims aren't going to be supportable. There's a lot of things that can happen. And so I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily to try, and I have not gone through the litigation with a fine-tooth comb to, determine what I think are really the merits or demerits in that particular case. But litigation is not always the answer. By the same token, legislation can take a long time as well. In a federal litigation, the average time to trial is 18 months or more. And for legislative purposes, we were very involved in trying to enact the CASE Act, the small claims legislation. That took a decade, almost to do. So I think as a group, what we are looking to do is to get authors involved in a conversation where we can stand together, work on solutions together. In the legislative area, I think it's going to be very important that all of the groups, having had experience with the CASE Act and how that went forward, all of the groups are going to have to agree on solutions, unite together. Copyright Alliance is a very valuable organization in pursuing legislative solutions. We're involved in their AI committee, and others should get involved in that as well. But we need to stand together to push for both legal, litigatable solutions, but legislative solutions as well. What we'd like to see is a solution where it's going to be difficult to determine whose stuff was scraped and used to train. But when they do library lending compensation or private copy legislation in these other countries, nobody knows what books are being lent, and nobody knows what cell phone is copying, what photograph or illustration, or what computer is printing out what image. The way the compensation is determined is on non-specific, non-author, non-title specific basis. For example, a platform might have to pay a fee for its subscribers to have access to content, and those fees get aggregated into the collective licensing pools. And then for the purposes of paying out money, algorithms are used, because we don't know that author A or author B or author C's particular work was scraped. And so you can't effectively, unlike the music industry where there's digital streaming and Sound Exchange can distribute money on the basis of the specific streams of specific recordings, we don't have image identifiers at this point that are sufficiently used in order to be able to track that information. And so we make allocations of revenue in other ways based on the numerosity of the author's publication or the numerosity of their the works that they publish, and allocate funds on an equitable basis that way. And so we'd be pushing for a legislative solution that gets people compensated, possibly on a non-author, non-title specific basis.
Yeah, thank you. There's sort of three. I want to, we have about 25 minutes left, and I want to ultimately get to the big picture, the largest picture here, because Dave, you told me you see this as an evolutionary shift in culture. So that we're talking about a huge suite, but in the specific for a moment, in terms of ethics, it seems as though there's sort of at least three aspects here. One is what AI companies like Stability AI, which is named in that lawsuit in Northern California. What are the ethics of doing business? What are the ethics if you are in charge of the pipeline? If you're doing the hiring of cartoonists or the replacement of cartoonists and using AI, and then there's creators, AI creators themselves who might pose as artists not using AI. A Princeton professor of computer science who specializes in AI told me to speak to the company part of this. The companies behind AI art generation, he told me, have developed and deployed them in a way that is hostile to artists. So this isn't benign. The scraping, the training images we talked about without consent or compensation. There's a way forward where, artists, you guys could be do it with consent and be open and get paid for it. Allowing the tools to produce images in the style of a particular artist seems like a clear case of appropriating the labor and visual distinctness. We spoke to some of that, but he said the developers could have treated artists as partners and stakeholders rather than raw material to train on. And he says companies claim it was inevitable. They're making excuses, he says, for the failure companies to develop the tech responsibility. We're talking about and I want to bring you, Mark, and Dave into this. Any response to, does this feel like a hostile approach?
You know what? Absolutely. When
Yeah.
you mentioned the term appropriation, as an Indigenous artist and designer, our culture is being appropriated left, right, and center. So we know what that battle is like. And so this conversation has got my feathers all ruffled, and I'm ready to go and go into battle, guys, to defend our rights as creatives. Whether you're an illustrator, painter, photographer, graphic designer, illustrator, we're all in the same battle. And I think part of that discussion here is this great start that we have, the pooling of minds and those that are part of this, and I think having that sort of battle mentality, I think, is something that shouldn't ever have taken place. It should have been a collaborative process, right? And then we may be, I mean, the world might have been looking in a different space, in a different place, and that we would be, for lack of a better term, in a better moment in time, right? Where we can work together with these AI programmers and developers and these larger corporations that are behind these AI programs. When James was talking about all the litigation, I was getting my anxiety level was just rising and rising. I'm thinking about all of the artists that are and I hate to say it, but it's tough out there. The competition's pretty fierce, but I think we need to come together united to be able to come to a solution. And I know we're sort of behind the 8 ball here, guys, and that we are playing catch up in this time. And so I think this is an amazing first step for us to coalesce and become more unified, because this is what it's going to take. If we're going to go into battle and protect our rights as creative artists, we need to do this.
I may have misspoken earlier. It's the Society of Publication Designers. I may have said production earlier. What they told me in a statement, to speak to what you're saying, Mark, is they're hopeful. They hire artists. They are not just denying the technologies. They hope They see this as an emergent technology. What they said to me was, quote, there's some guardrails. They want to see guardrails put in place on where the AI generators can pull from, that's either self-imposed or through legal regulation, a bank of images and artworks. It's a mix of public domain images, user-generated content, and a setup where artists, you guys have opted in. So you, on a per query basis, you're speaking of this, Jason, much like TV writer royalties. And Sarah Anderson can envision a similar system. Do you have hope that we can get to this opt-in with permission, where you're paid for each hit, and you're working with AI companies instead of against them?
Sure. Well, I pulled a couple of quotes from the guy that started Midjourney's interview in Forbes for my book here.
Yeah.
There isn't really a way to get 100 million images and know where they're coming from. To which I answered, if we'd only killed a few people, obviously that would be murder. But we've killed so many people now, we can't possibly know who they all are. So it's just not worth the court's time. And the other quote is, it would be cool if the images had metadata embedded in them about the copyright holder, but that's not a thing. Which I answered, well, you made it. It's only not a thing because you failed to make it a thing.
As an addendum to that, just briefly, Dave, I don't want you to lose your train of thought there, but a lot of the data that it's being scraped on is data that was uploaded to social media networks that actually remove the metadata. Even if artists, they really should use metadata in their images that they upload. A lot of artists do not, but even if they do, when they do so, the media platforms just strip out the metadata. It's so destructive to the integrity of actually being able to find the provenance of any art. So sorry, I didn't want to.
That's okay. I mean, I think my point was, I don't expect any ethical framework to come from the fundamental tech evangelists in San Francisco. I'm not part of a group. I don't represent anybody. I'm just an individual. I'm just here on my own. So my response to all this has just been that of an individual person in the world. I haven't thought about the copyright. I'll be honest. I haven't thought about it. I haven't thought about being scraped. I'm used to doing my work, publishing it. It's out in the world. It's got its own life. People look at it. Hopefully they like it, inspired by it, and maybe try and do their own versions of it, as I did when I was a young student and young illustrator. That's the nature of it. So I haven't really worried too much about that. Maybe I should. And I certainly would support anybody trying to set up legal frameworks and fine-tune these definitions, because they're very complicated. For example, if you make an image using Midjourney or whatever, and that's the final image, pops out, it's finished. Well, that's one thing. But I've been folding Midjourney into my work very happily by creating raw materials. And those raw materials then get painted into, they get collaged properly, they get ripped up, they get fully embedded in my working process. They are raw materials in the same way that I would take photographs of things, and those are raw materials. Or I'd make sculptural objects, and those are raw materials. Or I'd take bits of fabric, those are raw materials. So you try and unpick that legally.
Well,
it's impossible. And I'm sorry, just let me get to my end of train of thought here. Unfortunately, you're not going to like me for this. I honestly think it's too late. I think the virus is out. Pandora's box is open. So all of my questions and conclusions, what few conclusions I've come to, have been trying to deal with this in the real world. And I would love it if there was a fee every time my name was mentioned in a prompt. That would seem to be a simple device. I would love it if there was an opt-in, opt-out. But I don't see any political will to deal with the problems of social media. And those are really bloody obvious. And they've been with us for 15 years. There's certainly no political will to deal with this. There's no will from the people who created the things in the first place. So I've been focusing much more on definitions. As far as I'm concerned, art and creativity is a human activity. And what I mean by that, it's made by people so that you can explain your life to somebody else. Somebody else can see the world through your eyes. That is the definition of art and creativity for me. That's the definition of art. Definition of creativity for me is the process of doing that, the process of challenging yourself, of trying paths, trying different things, growing up as a human being. None of that is in the process of making AI stuff. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't meet the definition of creativity. So just as you would not allow an AI unit to play chess in a chess competition, they're different things, aren't they? In a 100-meter race, you wouldn't allow somebody to get in a car to race, would you? No, they're different things. So I've been much more focusing on the definition of art and creativity and keeping them separate.
Yeah. What you told me recently, Dave, was the arrival, whether by humanity or by car in this race, is the least important part of the experience. And speaking of definitions, what you told me was, quote, it doesn't vomit it, meaning AI does not vomit up art by any definition of the word that means anything to me. So there's, being hurt in the pocketbook, but then there's also, as an artist, is something that is like you said, Jason, the quote of a 21st century collage tool is automated collage. Is it any consolation that it is not, producing in your eyes art? Can each of you speak to that? I'm curious. Do you think is it art, and is there consolation if it's not?
I mean, the argument over whether it is art or not, I think, is for a separate conversation.
Yes.
I think if we stick to the ethics of it, the aforementioned Molly Crabapple, my fellow New Yorker artist, is
Yes.
she said that AI, further to what Dave was saying about arriving at the process instead of arriving at the destination instead of actually doing the process of art, which is the whole point of it. She was saying that AI generated proponents have told her that, hey, AI is a tool that artists can use to automate their work. And it just shows how little they actually understand us. Art isn't scrubbing toilets. It's not an unpleasant task that we would rather have robots do. It's what we want to do. We make it because it's who we are. And through immense effort, some of us have managed to actually earn a living by it, God forbid. It's precarious and our wages haven't risen, but we love this work and we love the process of it too much to just palm it off to some robot. And it's that love that the AI generator art proponents never get. And to Mark's point about, I think he's absolutely right that, one thing that hasn't been uttered to an artist during this entire process is, hey, what do you think? No artist has ever said, yeah, thanks for asking. Like a consideration, if this technology was developed alongside artists in a way that other technology companies like Wacom and Adobe do, you'd have been able to develop a far superior tool than the blunt force steamroller that they've got now. And instead of, it could have just been one more tool, as Dave says, he's integrating Midjourney into his workflow, but it could have been so much better. It could have been more of a tool in a toolkit that every modern artist ends up using all the time, guilt-free. It's hard to ethically use tools, though, that were built on unethical means. If I risk, you basically, they've made this legion of enemies who'll never assist them now. You've lost the most valuable collaborators you could ever have wished for. So, people who are saying, oh, why are we picking on this new nascent technology? It hasn't even developed yet. Yes, we know it's at the bottom of the curve. It's going to get way better. We know this. Why do we have to hate on this now? Painting a picture like all the artists at Goliath and AI is David. It's a $29 billion industry. Like, it's not much of a David. So the kind of ask forgiveness, not permission model that they've tried so far, sort of building this $29 billion technology on the uncompensated work of a legion of unwilling collaborators, not a great idea. And I hate to be a pessimist. I do have hope, and I see tools that are working towards working within this new paradigm, I do, similar to Dave, feel like the train's already out of the station and there's no brake to pull.
Dave, you had told me if everyone can draw like Michelangelo, there is no Michelangelo, and you don't mean that obviously literally, but the ability to if you're reproducing in a way that is the greatest of all deep fakes in a way, or yeah, go ahead.
What I meant actually was that we're dealing with a fundamental structure of society.
Yes.
That's why I meant it was a quantum jump or an evolutionary step, potential evolutionary step. And that might happen. And, these are the conversations and definitions that we're going to have to have.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the collateral damage will be massive. I think the structure of what we value about creativity, and I don't mean this as some sort of elitist thing, that it's just the really great artists. I'm not just talking about them. Creativity is entirely democratic. Anybody can be creative. Anybody can pick up a pencil or sing a song or try and play piano. Or the point of it is not the fact that you are suddenly Michelangelo or can do something brilliant. It's the process of doing it. And just the joy of doing it. And there are, thousands and thousands of people just that enjoying the pure pleasure of doing it. But we do it because we value those people who can really do it extraordinarily well. They inspire us. They make us want to try to do that. Well, this is a fundamental part of the structure of society. It's part of our sense of ourselves, what we believe in, what we value in life, keeps us sane. I mean, this is big, big stuff. And to change this, we can, if that's what we decide as a society to do. But these are big forces at play. This is much bigger for me than just, you nick my image, my copyrighted image, and noodling away at legal cases. I support them. It's great that they're happening, but this is a much bigger question for me.
You've called it an evolutionary shift in our culture, and I've interviewed artists who are very pro AI and still say they see this as the biggest shift since a hominid was spitting in a cave at his hand to make first images. So I want to ask each of you in the time we have left about that, where to prognosticate a bit. I wouldn't have guessed we'd be here 2 years ago. I interviewed a director 12 years ago, said, we can put anything on the screen that you can imagine. And the implication was we'll get there. The public will gain that use eventually as well. Where are we in pick your time frame, but as we hurdle forth in this massive shift, where are we in 2 years, 3 years, or if you even want to attempt a crystal ball in 5 years? Both is free to take it as visual artists, which is the theme of our talk today, but feel free to broaden it because the tentacles are far-reaching. Please, all of you, each of you.
Well, okay. I would say the only thing that hasn't been mentioned so far that I think is definitely on the horizon is the ability for AI to generate images that have deep ethical problems. Images of people in compromising, a politician in a compromising position as evidence for one side of a political fight to get rid of them. Images to support conspiracy theories and fake news, and pictures of Ukraine soldiers wearing swastikas. Whatever the human degenerative mind can think of will be then created as a photograph, as an image, a photographic quality image to support that story, that fake story. So I worry that that's coming, but I've been worrying about that sort of stuff for ages, and nobody seems to care. Politicians don't seem to care. There don't seem to be any movements to stop deep fake or any of these things from happening. We just seem to be on this sort of weird collision course with chaos.
Yeah, the rest of you, each of you answer to this. I did want to note in an earlier AI ethics panel today, there was an expert from Montreal AI Ethics Institute who said, quote, if the genie is halfway out of the bottle, you can still punch it back in. So part and parcel with your prognostication, and my alliteration, where are we? Can the genie be punched back in, and where do you see us going forward?
I think it's a strange analogy in this case, but it is true because it feels indistinguishable from magic. And I would note that if anyone hasn't seen the previous panels, definitely go back and watch them. There's a great piece on a new piece of technology called the Glaze Project, which is data protection for artists, adding a cloak layer to digital artwork that makes it harder for AI to mimic. So there is hope. But to your question, my thoughts on the development of it, GPT-4 is coming at the end of this year, but since when as a society or as an economy have we ever accepted the first or even the second or third iteration of a product? Like, we're not still using our round cornered iPhones, making 2G calls and waiting 18 seconds for our email app to load. When in history has a piece of technology come out first as the perfect iteration of that technology? Good, solid technology needs to go through that testing and development period, that rigorous testing, so that it works properly without breaking laws, without damaging society and the economy. Every great weapon or tool that's ever been designed goes from sort of good to great to indispensable by sort of being pounded from every angle. And I think I mentioned, I think we're at the start of the sigmoid curve on this. I don't think we're at the end of it. We haven't seen what these tools can really do yet. And I think it's really important now, we should have done this by now, but to sort of, I think Sam Harris was the first to sort of suggest this, something like a Manhattan Project on the topic of artificial intelligence, not just in this technology, but in every instance of AI and how it's affecting all kinds of industries. I think we're in the Napster phase right now of this technology. It's being fueled by piracy. I remember when Napster went down, LimeWire and Kazaa popped up, and then we had iTunes and 99-cent tracks, and then we got Spotify. We landed on Spotify. The musicians weren't thrilled with it. They had to go on tour to make money, but at least there was some compensation, and there was an algorithm to determine how many shavings of 1 cent each artist got. It's something. It's better than nothing. To the overarching question of this as it pertains to artists and a generation killer, I think the fact that you know what artist's name to punch into the prompt illustrates the value of that individual artist's work, of an individual artist's work. You can't copyright the style, but their style is their contribution to the world. And they ought to have the ability to have control over how much of that they give to the world. There's an ethical problem here where if artists see that, young artist, like a young kid in 2040, sees this as de rigueur, as just what it is, what's the point of wanting to try and learn the back end of it and try and control their own body of work if they see that it can just be bastardized and used in such a way to just sort of create, fake versions of their work long after they're dead? Like, what's the point? Sorry, I'm rambling.
Not at all. Mark or James, as our time is tight, but please go.
I'm just, so go ahead, James. I defer.
So you don't have a God-given natural right to protect your work in the United States. Your rights come from a copyright law that was enacted by a legislature in 1909, several times amended, and carves away exceptions to the rights that you have, many times in ways that you don't even want. But these are the laws that we have, and new laws can be established, and these laws can embrace and address directly or incidentally a lot of the sociological and human concerns that are an outgrowth of this technology. You could have a law that says AI is illegal. Wow. Okay, the genie could be all the way out of the bottle. It's not going to happen, but there are possible solutions that can be implemented. In other countries will do that. They are more pro-author. They have better legal systems than the United States. They're more elaborate, and the AI generators are going to be dealing not only with the US authors, but authors and legislatures from around the world. We're talking to many of our sister societies in Belgium and France and Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, about what they are doing on this topic, and they are convening and working towards solutions. We're not the only ones. It's just not just the United States. I project that there will be a legislative response of some sort and a legal response of some sort addressing this, at least to some extent, in behalf of the authors, because I don't think society is going to let the entire community of authors go by the wayside.
Mark, you want to take us out, please? What do you see going forward?
I would, I'm of the same mindset with Jason there, and express the same concerns that James has. And I think we're at the very cusp. We're at the very start of this. When we look at how this will evolve, how quickly it will evolve, I think this is the time. And I think we're already doing this. We're already coming together, and we got to remember that, when we are creatives, we put in our humanity. And I think we always got to remember that with new technology, we always have to be mindful of the humanity that is at play here, right? And not to forget that. So when someone says, can we put the genie back in the bottle? I don't think so. I think we're already too far along. But if that's not to say that, what is that genie going to look like? We can still have influence over what happens moving forward. And I think that's the positive note here. I want to be able to, illustrate that this can't be all, doom and gloom. There is a positive side of things, and that's what I believe in. And I believe that, we can work together and make AI what we want it to be. Not this doom and gloom, not this capitalistic sort of sense of mine and yours and all of that baggage that comes along with that. Remember that we are all humans, we are all relatable, and that we can use technology, for lack of a better term, for good. And this is the pivotal point where we can come together and have those discussions and put up those guardrails for protection and safety. This is the time to do it.
Well said. May ethics catch up. May those guardrails get built. May you all be getting paid. Not that's not why you're artists, but hey, it sustains a life of creativity. And may we all heal from our scrapings. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. You've all been eloquent and hyper relevant in this time that's changing every day. And I thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.